This is just brilliant. Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week brought on Republican Senator Lindsey Graham and gave him so much time to set his own trap that he was about to fall in, saying that it's just so horrific, so provocative, unsafe, dangerous for Vice President Kamala Harris to call Trump a fascist. Now, the first time Kamala Harris, to my knowledge, called Trump that was after Trump's own former chief of staff, longest serving chief of staff, General John Kelly said it on a recording that the New York Times published and said he shows all the signs of a fascist, and then identified those reasons. So Harris just going, hey, let's listen to the people who know Trump the best. His former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, former secretaries of defense, former chief of staff, former national security advisor, and so many other things. But those are the ones that I have memorized off the top of my head, which is why you hear them a lot. And Lindsey Graham did not know what was in store for him. Here it is. While you're watching, please do, as I'm dealing with lots of earpiece. That's not how it's supposed to look. While I figure that out and you watch this clip, also make sure you've clicked the subscribe button, as we're charging towards 1 million subscribers. We're so close. You got us to 900,000. Thank you so much. Just a little bit further to 1 million. And if we can do that before the election, that would be crazy awesome. Here's Lindsey Graham. Less crazy awesome. And let me fix that audio real quick.
Not a fascist. He's not Hitler. And that shows you how desperate this campaign is. You got 3 retired generals who've been out of the game for a while, 3 weeks before the election, trying to replace joy with fear. And let me say one thing to these generals. I admire you. I respect you. But for 20 years, you were given, and others, billions of dollars to train the Iraqi and the Afghan army, and they folded like a cheap suit. How about a little self-reflection about the job you did before you criticize others?
I mean, I could go through all the good things you've said about all 3 of those men. And look, Donald Trump...
That was before they weighed in and turned America upside down.
Donald Trump
using rhetoric that's dangerous and is off base. So they decided to do this. You're the ones that want to weigh in. Okay, if you want to call him Hitler...
They didn't call him Hitler.
Well,
what they did is they warned
they're trying to scare
of what
Americans that this man can't fix the problems we need fixed. I reject that. I was there too. I was around him. I don't think he's a fascist. I thought he was a very strong president at a time we needed a strong president. I think he will be a strong president to get this country back on track, to revive our economy, to secure our border, and put out fires. They're telling you they want 4 more years of Kamala Harris and 4 more years of the same policy. To these generals, you're trying to tell America that things are good now. They're terrible now. And if she's elected based on your advice, everything goes to hell at home and abroad. So reject their advice.
Oh, gosh. I'm not going to get into it again, but we continue to live in a world where MAGA convinces people what Biden-Harris had to inherit, the disaster on all fronts, didn't exist, and it all started under them, and all the economic things, and all the public health things, and all the crime things that they had to deal with, them successfully dealing with all of that, they don't get credit for because Lindsey Graham says so. Well, then Jonathan Karl nicely, and I guess I can just keep playing this clip, sort of long, but nicely slams Lindsey Graham with a brutal compilation.
Now, you have been very critical of the generals, 2 of them using the word fascist. Mitch McConnell and Secretary and Speaker Johnson have been very critical, saying this is inciting violence. How dare you call Donald Trump a fascist? Let me just play you a little bit about what Donald Trump has had to say about Kamala Harris.
The true divide in American politics today is between these far-left fascists, led by Harris and her group. We have a fascist person running who's incompetent. She's a Marxist, communist, fascist, socialist. She's not actually a socialist. She's gone past that. Somebody's got to explain this woman. This is a radical left Marxist, communist, fascist.
So why don't you ask me, do I think Kamala Harris is a fascist? No. Do I think she's a communist? No. I think she's the most liberal person to ever be dominated by a major party. I think she's ineffective.
Ever to be what by a major party?
think she's incompetent. She's had a chance to be the border czar and failed miserably. On her watch, she advised President Biden it was a good thing to get out of Afghanistan. She has been antagonistic to giving Ukraine and Israel the military.
Well, we can acknowledge that when it comes to the
They really get hit on both sides of that, don't they? What?
insults, they come just as strong, maybe stronger.
But you're not.
We're out of time.
We're not having Lindsey.
Yeah, definitely on Ukraine. It is something for sure for Lindsey Graham to say one of the reasons that Kamala Harris is bad is because she's been against giving aid to Ukraine, along with Biden being against it as much as they should, when Trump refuses to say he wants Ukraine to win the war and refuses to promise any aid and obviously so clearly opposes aid. But I am so glad the mainstream media has picked up on this inconsistency, which is that Harris now has called Trump a fascist, I think once, maybe a few times since then, but just recently, again, because of people around Trump who served alongside him now saying it. And Trump, meanwhile, has been calling her that this whole entire campaign cycle. And they don't seem to see how if you're saying that by itself is a provocation of violence, then he's doing it by his own standard. Now, my thing, you've heard me when violent acts happen. You've heard me say that while the individual act, blame goes on the individual who engaged in it, mass shooting, for example, often we can point to underlying political points that I want to make about it, which is to say, sometimes the political rhetoric, you could say, inspired violence. And sometimes anti-LGBTQ rhetoric has inspired violence, or the Great Replacement theory. And I think we have to keep in mind that when we point to those things, it's not that in some cases it's okay to talk about how rhetoric impacts violence, and in some cases it's not. It's, as it is with so many things, these bold proclamations of a principle often actually don't apply when people apply them to specific cases. And so for me, it's when you're out there lying, when you lie about something, and then someone uses that to justify violence, the person is the deranged person who did the violence. They're the one who holds responsibility for it, which is why under the law they do. But we can point to how, see, this is a part of why your dishonesty is so dangerous. With, for example, the assassination attempts, which were terrible, against Trump, I told the MAGA movement I was open to, just for the sake of due diligence, checking in on all of my rhetoric to make sure that none of it was going overboard, was inaccurate, was a lie, obviously, against Trump, and could have played a role. And in analyzing, I realized it didn't, which is why I posed to MAGA if they could find a better way for me to describe the acts that Trump's engaged in that they don't feel is provoking violence, even though along with every one of those points comes the message that we solve a threat to democracy, never through violence. So in the case of the Great Replacement theory, there's both direct links to violence that has been engaged in by right-wingers because of that, or Trump's election lies. The person who attacked Paul Pelosi cited election lies as a part of that. There's the link, and there's the fact that there's a different thing that could replace the rhetoric that motivated it. In the case of lies, replacing it with the truth. Or sometimes people are speaking truth, but they go overboard. And those cases need to be called out as well. But accurately describing Trump as exhibiting signs of fascism, you can't call that provocation of violence when, number one, all the people advocating that, at least prominently, advocate for a peaceful, democratic solution. And number two, no one's explained what a better way to describe very factual things that Trump exhibits than that term, or a threat to democracy, etc. And so Jake Tapper also made this point.
The two Republican leaders expressing concern about Kamala Harris calling Donald Trump a fascist. Let's show an example of Harris doing exactly what McConnell and Johnson are taking issue with.
She's a Marxist, communist, fascist, socialist.
I'm sorry, the control room, that was actually Donald Trump calling Kamala Harris a fascist in September. Control room, are you ready? Please run the clip of Kamala Harris calling Donald Trump a fascist, which offended the Republican leaders.
Somebody's got to explain this woman. This is a radical left, Marxist, communist, fascist.
Okay, again, I'm sorry. That was Trump calling Harris a fascist. I apologize. Control room, can we get it together? Johnson and McConnell are very upset that Kamala Harris called Donald Trump a fascist. Please roll the clip.
We have a fascist person running who's incompetent.
Okay, so you get the trend. That great delivery, by the way, because both Jaden and I were sitting next to each other when I originally played that clip, and I was thinking, that's kind of a weird introduction. And then it ends up being Trump, and you're like, oh, I see. Because I'd rather debate the merits. You're saying Harris is a fascist. How do you believe that? And watch that unravel, because it does and it would. And then you ask me why I think Trump's a fascist, and I'll explain it as I've now been doing for years. And you can judge the merits of that. But when they make these principled statements of it's just by itself, it's just dangerous. I don't care if a bunch of people who worked alongside Trump say that it's the case. It's just terrible and horrible for you to ever say it, no matter what the circumstances were. Then, of course, we have to point to your hypocrisy. Now, given the stakes of this election, you need to see this moment from Mika Brzezinski, who is, of course, a host on Morning Joe on MSNBC, but she went on The View and just delivered sort of summoning, channeling all of our feelings about this election for a moment, as you're going to see.
I think you heard us before you came out. We were talking earlier about yesterday's Trump rally from hell at Madison Square Garden. So what did you make of it?
Well, I think it was everything that you need to know about Donald Trump in one weird white nationalist Nazi type rally. And of course, there's historic parallels to where and when this happened. But even more so, it also points out everything that we know, but it's important to act on right now because this is the moment and we won't have it again. Nobody gets a pass trashing America. Puerto Rican Americans, nobody gets a pass degrading people. Nobody gets a pass degrading legal migrants and terrorizing people. Nobody gets a pass threatening his enemies with using the military against them. Nobody gets a pass on inciting an insurrection. Nobody gets a pass on saying he fancies Hitler and wants to have generals like his. Nobody gets a pass on insulting veterans and saying those who died for our country are suckers and losers, except for convicted felon Donald Trump. And guys, here's the warning. You all have set it up. But let me take it a step further, please, if I may. This is called normalization. This is the descent into fascism, if we so choose. Normalizing January 6th, it's a day of love. It's a day of love. I'll say it again and again and again. Normalizing enemy from within. I'll say it again and again. I'll say it again and again until you get tired of it, until it's not so funny anymore, or you think he doesn't mean it until you realize he does mean it and it's too late. Saying these strict abortion bans are a beautiful thing. Are you kidding me? We got to wake up. And here's the good news, because I come with such dire warnings, and I mean them from the bottom of my heart as a daughter of refugees who came here escaping war, came here for America to be a part of a democracy, to be a part of building something beautiful where they could be free. I'm telling you, the good news is that I believe women will be the beacon in this election.
If Vice President Kamala Harris does win and Donald Trump does lose, that will definitely be one of the factors. So hopefully she's correct about what the outcome will be. But sometimes when you see me express more emotion than normal, it's because her phrase was correct, wake up. I want people to wake up. And I think I've said it before, but when you do this and you practice no matter what the story is, just talking in a way that is nice and articulate and professional and level-headed, and I'm going to make sure that, then it's easy to do that through stories that you don't want that. It's the same reason why I'm not really even blaming the individuals, but on these big corporate outlets, you're reading a script and you've practiced that your whole life. And today, Donald Trump is holding a rally and blah, 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 and he's saying this. And, blah, blah, blah. And now he's saying that the enemy from within need to be uprooted like vermin. Because that's the only thing we know, and it's not known as professional, to go, guys, hello, this is not normal, this is not okay, you're not crazy seeing this and going, I feel scared about it. Doing that is what needs to be done so that people can realize what we're talking about here. Yes, making the difficult, sometimes controversial comparisons. Calling out the rhetoric to the extent that it needs to be called out. And not allowing for people to gaslight the hell out of you by going, oh my gosh, do you actually care? Do you actually care about January 6th? Do you actually care about him assembling fraudulent electors to just completely end our democratic process? Oh my gosh. Weirdo. Do you actually care about him calling people who beat police officers patriots? Freak. But there's a whole machine that's built to that. So I'm really happy to see Mika Brzezinski expressing in the way that it needs to be what is at stake here. And let's see how the results turn out. But even if they turn out correctly, and in the way that I am hoping, which they very well could, we're still going to have a conversation about the takeaways from how close it's going to be, regardless. And then, of course, if Trump wins, the takeaways from what has gone so wrong. Yeah, I guess I should leave it there. What has gone so wrong with us as a people that we do this? And what's so messed up about the media environment, the information environment, and how do we undo that through the mechanisms of power that we have? Let me know what you thought in the comments. Support the show. Get the members only bonus show by clicking that join button below.